Hello everyone, Randolph here. Well, it's been 30 years since the release of the original Legend of Zelda game. Amazing 30 years of magic, swordplay, green tunics, and pointy ears. So with this, a thought has returned to me from way back. Throughout gaming and within Zelda fandom, there are many things that we argue on. Whether or not a game where you play as Zelda would work, if the series would have a futuristic setting, whether you agree with Nintendo's official timeline or not, or which game started the series' decline, or if there even is one. But there are some things that are usually agreed on. The CDI games are horrible, Fi and Navi are the most annoying things in the games, and there are 3 games that people agree on that are the best in the series: Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and The Wind Waker. And for people who think A Link to the Past or the original game are the best, I'll say at the very least, those 3 are the best 3D Zelda games. These are what I call the Triforce of Zelda games, and after Wind Waker is where people say the series started to slip. But which one is the best? Which one is on top? I'll try to answer this by going through each game and seeing which had the best of, well, everything overall. I won't go by which had the best story or gameplay, since 2 of them have similar stories and all basically play the same besides for a few central mechanics. Also a quick note, I know all these 3 games were remade, but I'm not going to count their remakes in this thing. I'm only counting their original releases. Now if you're the few rock dwellers that don't know these games, I'll try to give a summary. Ocarina of Time is the 5th Zelda game and the first 3D game of the series. It's been pushed back for a few years and has received the record for most pre-orders at 350,000. Thanks G4 Icons. The story is now the basics of pretty much every Zelda game, but here we go. You play it as a Link whom, after being summoned by the Great Deku Tree and then the Princess Zelda, he is led on a journey across Hyrule, righting wrongs that were given to the many inhabitants like the Gorons and the Zoras, all by Ganondorf, the Gerudo King. Link has to gain the 3 Spirit Stones that gain the Master Sword, where, in this game, sends him back and forth in time. Now as adult Link, he has to free the sages and defeat Ganondorf, who took over after Link was in stasis. Pretty simple stuff. Majora's Mask was developed within a year after the release of Ocarina of Time, and shows everyone how to make a game a year after the last one using the same assets. Some companies really need to learn this, especially nowadays. Anyway, after saving the future from Ganondorf, Link gets to relive his childhood, where he turns Ganondorf in and then goes off to find Navi, who left after returning to the past. He is ambushed by the Skull Kid and his 2 fairy friends, Tattle and Tail. They steal his stuff and Link follows them into a cave where he is soon taken to another world, Alice in Wonderland style, where Skull Kid transforms him into a Deku Shrub. He follows him into the world of Termina, where he learns that the Skull Kid is planning to destroy the world by crashing what looks like the moon into it. So he has to find a way to stop the Skull Kid's plan after transforming back into his normal body. He does this by reliving 3 days within this world, putting right to the multitude amounts of wrong. It's really like how Yahtzee says in his review, life just kicks Link in the teeth in this one. Now Wind Waker is slightly different. A GameCube title that got people talking, mostly because they thought a tech demo with Link fighting Ganondorf was how this game would have looked. This game was released 3 years after Majora's Mask and beat Ocarina of Time's record with 500,000 pre-orders. So the story is that generations after the adult Link timeline in Ocarina of Time, this new Link has an interesting birthday, getting a suit of the hero of time, meeting pirates, and has his sister taken by a giant bird. Not bad for a birthday! This game is about him venturing across the Great Sea, finding the means to save his sister and then the world from a freed Ganondorf. Now that we have the summary of each game, minus spoilers, let's see which one is better. So where do we begin? Well, if we can't look at their stories, we can look at their concepts. Damn near every main Nintendo franchise has a concept with each new entry. Kirby, Mario, and yes, even Zelda each have different concepts in most of their games. Mario is from 3D platforming with 64 to working with a squirt gun jetpack in Sunshine to damn near 360 platforming with Galaxy. Kirby has combining abilities with crystal shards, non-linear paths in Amazing Mirror, and multiple stories / small games in one in Superstar with their own concepts inside of them. And Zelda? Well, with these three it's time travel with Ocarina, reliving 3 days and the mask in Majora's Mask, and sailing around a big world and being a mini pirate in Wind Waker. And honestly, only one of these concepts are interesting. I'll just go out and say it. Majora's Mask is the one that stands out. With both Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker, the concepts are here and there and a bit optional in Wind Waker's case. In Ocarina, you go back and forth between being Child Link and Adult Link, yet you don't really need to switch out that much. Only by the Shadow Temple you need to go back twice, otherwise you're Child Link and then Adult Link the whole game. And with the two, it gives you certain items each can use. With Child Link it makes sense, you don't use items that you get later on as an adult, but I wonder why you can't use the child items as an adult. I get the Deku shield, but with stuff like the boomerang, it feels like it still could be useful. Even with the slingshot, even though you have a bow and arrow, it could still be used when you run out of arrows. Plus, the future should show more of the land going to hell after Ganondorf has taken over. Besides the main town being in ruins with Redeads around and his castle replacing the Hyrule family's castle, everything's rather the same outside of minor stuff in each land, like the lake damn near drying up, and the Zoras being frozen. There's no real lingering threat rather than just going over and fixing it up. Wind Waker did this better with one island actually being destroyed by Ganondorf and his forces searching for the last pearl. During my first playthrough, that made me fear for some of the things that could happen to other islands and Link's home. Speaking of, the sailing in Wind Waker is a lot of fun and can be pretty relaxing when you have to take a long trip. It's very interesting that you experience the world in a new way. Seeing each island come into frame is kinda like, explore me! You're almost here! And then fighting enemies with bombs and hunting treasure with the hook claw is good for the pirate feeling. Yet, sailing for a long time can be pretty irritating, and is usually a lot of people's negative about the game. And now with Majora's Mask concept, oh boy, there's barely anything that tops it. Honestly, the fact that you have to relive 3 days and each time you do, all your work is reset as if nothing happened, minus any important items or money you save into the bank, is kinda interesting. It shows a bit of hurry for some events, and while scheduled adventure in games isn't new nowadays, it gives an impression that this is a living world, and hey, if you miss it, you miss it. Until you go back in time. There's no real reason to start anything except dungeons without restarting 3 days, and that's kind of a downside. And hell, miss an event by a minute, boom, reset. Or you can't start an event without a certain item or mask is kind of annoying, but in the end, it is a bit charming. Speaking of the masks, it does change up the gameplay with the 3 main masks, Deku, Goron, and Zora. It is fun to play as these 3 with different ways to do things, i.e. temporary flying with Deku Link, swimming around as Zora Link, and rolling around as Goron Link. Overall, Majora's Mask's concept is one of a kind. Point goes to Majora's Mask with Wind Waker getting second place. What's a good of a concept without a place to put it in? This is the best overworlds. Each game has their own unique overworlds. Ocarina of Time has the land of Hyrule for the first time in 3D, Majora's Mask has the parallel world of Termina, and Wind Waker has the Great Sea with its many islands. So this should be easy to pick, right? Nope, not really. Ocarina of Time's Hyrule is a classic nowadays. The feeling of it and seeing the many various landscapes in the distance is pretty atmospheric. But with the faults that I said about the game's concept is kind of the same here. I wish that there was a bigger change to it when going between the two timelines. The only thing again change is the castle town and possibly seeing Ganon's castle. But that's it. There is a change with the monsters where the child time has some big damn near indestructible pineapples that fly with spinning blades during the day and skeletons during the night. And the adult timeline is empty during the day and filled with pose during the night. You move alright and there's no real hassle to go anywhere. Unlike Majora's Mask. In here there are plenty of monsters to keep you occupied while traveling, and there is something to the landscapes as they are together before and after saving them. But it feels too big at times, especially as normal and DQ Link, and everything makes it essential to get the bunny mask and Epona as soon as possible to traverse it. And everything is pretty restricted from you until you get X or Y. It looks okay, but with it teasing you, then it's less interesting. While a few things were restricted in Ocarina of Time, you could still explore many places. Here you're stuck with the overworld and get each section at a time. Now with Wind Waker, it's what either makes or breaks the love of the game for most people. This pretty much goes with the concept of sailing around the sea and being a bit of a pirate. Collecting treasure, exploring the many lands, fighting off giant squids and the giant flying pineapples again. Anyway, the con of this is that it can take a long time due to the smooth loading the game does in the background while sailing to a new section. And for me, I do believe the pros outweigh the cons. And with that, I'm going to give the point to Wind Waker because it's still fun to sail around and explore the vast landscape that is the Great Sea. It's still very immersive, at least to me, and sailing across the sea is very soothing. I'll give the second place to Ocarina of Time because the landscape of Hyrule is very much a classic nowadays and sets up pretty much every landscape of Hyrule ever since. Not that I hate Majora's Mask's land of Termina, but compared to the other two, it feels too expansive in a way and too limited. The point goes to Wind Waker and second place goes to Ocarina of Time. But hey, you can't explore these vast landscapes without someone with you. These are the best companions. The Legend of Zelda series is no stranger to having Link having a companion in these adventures. And these games are no exceptions. Hell, Ocarina of Time is technically the first one for Link to have a companion in. And since I don't have Twilight Princess in this comparison, this isn't as obvious since Midna is the best one of them yet, in my opinion. So who do you have in these three games? In Ocarina of Time, of course we have...
Hey, listen! Hey, listen! Hey, listen! Hey, listen!
Navi. Dear Lord, we have Navi. And... I don't hate him. Honestly, I don't understand most of the hate this character gets. He's very helpful and slightly has a role in the story. The whole hey listen crap can be a little annoying, but it's not drive you crazy and kill everything around you kind of annoying that most people apparently have. And quite honestly, I think Tattle is far more annoying. She is just a carry-on rather than a companion. All of her helpfulness is damn near non-existent to the point that all of her monster descriptions are basically just, hey, you played Ocarina of Time before, right? Well, why the hell are you asking me what these monsters are? Yes, it's mostly because she has a well-defined personality, but no, that doesn't excuse her lack of helping. At least Navi's constant "hey listen" stuff was trying to be helpful, and it constantly popping up to the point that it can be annoying, but it was there in case you don't know what you're doing. Tattle mostly chats with you during the beginning, and after that, she barely helps you, and even when her chimes are ringing, anything she says isn't really that important. Now with Wind Waker, we have the King of Red Lions, who turns out to be the King of Hyrule. First off, it's kinda cool that the King is helping you, let alone they acknowledge the King. Second off, he's essential to the story in a way, and even helps out taking out the bad guy at the end. He doesn't really bug you as much as Navi does, heck he barely contacts you at all in most of the game, kinda like Tattle. But he will help you get back on track, like Navi, but without an annoying voice that people can get irritated at. So in the end, I have to give it to the King of Red Lions. He's just more important to the story. And of course, the second point has to go to Navi because he's not Tattle. But hey, Link has to fight someone in these games. This is the best villain. Like most Nintendo franchises, The Legend of Zelda has usually one central villain, and in some games they have one-shots, or villains that turn out to either be the same central villain, or work for him. That central villain in this series is none other than Ganon/Ganondorf. Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker have him as the main villain from start to finish, and in case of Majora's Mask, the central villain of the game is, well, Majora's Mask, mostly worn by the Skull Kid. So it might be difficult for Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker since they both have the same villain, yet they have some differences, at least in motivation. Let's start with Ocarina of Time's version of Ganondorf. As a game taking place before some of the other games in this franchise, this is the first time we meet Ganondorf, the Gerudo King, and his motivation is pretty simple, to take over the world of Hyrule. And he does, more or less. In the 7 years Link went through skipping time, Ganondorf found a way to go to the sacred grounds and rule over the land of Hyrule. But he still wants power in the form of the Triforce. Now Wind Waker takes that and expands his motivation on why he wants Hyrule, by saying that living in the Gerudo lands, there is death all around him and the feeling of death, while all the lands of Hyrule was full of life, and he wanted that. Plus, with the land flooded, he had to find a way to find the princess via a giant bird, and then to test out the new hero so he can get the Triforce from the two. And he does, only to be thwarted at the last second. This brought a little more meat into the character of Ganondorf, rather than him just being a power-hungry tyrant that we've known of in Ocarina of Time and even past games. Now for Skull Kid and the Mask of Majora. And I'll just say this right now, I hate Skull Kid. And not for the fact that he's a villain or anything like that, but because, well, he's a dick! He screws around with a lot of people even before he got the mask, and his only friends at the time, the Giants, had to step in and say, "Hey dude, stop being a dick." And even after getting other friends in the form of the two fairies, Tattle and Tail, he steals from the Happy Mask salesman and grabs Majora's Mask. Yeah, he's a prick, but at least he's quick about his motivation to destroy everything under the mask's influence. I mean, 3 days, the moon comes down, everyone dies. That's it. And the backstory to the Mask of Majora is very compelling about it being from a hide of a demon and that it still has demonic power. Plus, it's still having some sort of conscience is really rather terrifying. It's going to kill everyone no matter what. And you feel that, especially once it latches off a Skull Kid at the end. We all know that the pain and suffering throughout the land is probably more Skull Kid's influence, but the mask is still hell-bent on ruining people's lives and killing everyone. And that's why Majora's Mask gets the point on this one, and Wind Waker gets half point. hey, what about everyone else? These are the best main NPCs. What's a game like Zelda be without NPCs? Well, it'll probably be more like the first one, but anyway, after that one, there's been many NPCs in the games, and the major ones help out Link along his adventures. The major NPCs are, to me, usually the ones that affect the story. I would put Zelda here, but she's featured only in 2 of the 3, so I won't count her. There are others like Impa and the Sages from Ocarina of Time, helping Link out both before and after his time skip. Sarah is one of his friends and probably would-be love interest. Impa is Zelda's caretaker and protector. Ruto is a brat, but she's kinda playful. Anyone else is either just nice or dickish or just minding their own business. In the case of Wind Waker, we have the pirates, which have a variety of personalities here and there, and mostly just other nice people, and some of the more dickish people in the game do get what they deserve, like the bomb salesman, or in the case of Majora's Mask, where pretty much everyone in their own right is a major NPC. The romantic couple, the sisters in the milk farm where the little one is hunting down aliens, the Zors who have a rock band, the girls with the baby problems, and such other much things. For this one, I'm gonna say it's pretty tied, since I can't really see which NPCs are more important here or there, but I will say Majora's Mask gets the slightest edge since everyone has a story little by little. And I'll have to give Wind Waker a half point because they're just slightly better than Ocarina. Then this one is just really tied, just barely with at least those 2. Majora's Mask gets the point. But hey, saving the world isn't the only thing you can do in these games. Here are the best side quests. Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask has to be the winner in this one. The game it was supposed to be originally was titled Zelda's Side Story, for Christ's sakes. The whole game is side quests and the rewards help you throughout the game. This ties in with the issue with the NPCs. These quests do show more of the world of Termina and its people, especially with the impending doom. So since this winner is a no-brainer, what about second place? And for these, I'm not gonna go for the obvious like finding the great fairies or heart pieces and the like. In Ocarina of Time, the main side quests are a few things that can benefit you on your adventure. The most prominent being gaining the Borogan sword or getting Epona, the horse. In Wind Waker, training for new moves with Zunara. While great, there's not much to it besides learning the ultimate spinning move. There is the deed quest, but you'll need to do it anyway, much like a lot of these. Oh, and the Kokori Tree Spirit quest has you wander the Great Sea to water trees to help gain land, but you don't see the conclusion of this, even at the end where there could be just a small cutscene, but no, nothing. There is the figure side quest, but once again, nothing comes of it. So Ocarina of Time is the runner-up, no questions asked. At least in their lacking of this game-only side quests, they have benefits like a new sword or riding a horse around the land. Wind Waker has nothing like that, only stuff that we probably had to do anyway, or there's no real reward outside of getting the usual heart piece or something like that. So, point goes to Majora's Mask obviously, with Ocarina of Time with its second place. Before we get to the real meat of a Zelda game, we should look at the ones who goes on these epic adventures. Here's the best Link. Alright, I'm not going to draw this one out very long. It's Wind Waker's Link. Those whom saw my top links already knew this. This Link has a well-shown personality only through emotions. He's silly but still serious. He is determined to save his sister and then the world. Hell, this adventure is how he goes from celebrating the legendary hero to rising up to the same stature, or even surpassing it and making his own legend. So I'm guessing you think it's going to be hard since Majora's Mask Link and Ocarina of Time's Link is the same guy, right? Nope, not really. In short, Link in Ocarina is just there. Pretty plain, and while I have a little hint of personality, he really is just a hero by destiny and nothing more. Now him in Majora's Mask? Well, take all that hero by destiny stuff and throw it out the window. It really started kind of like the Link in Wind Waker, as a personal quest, this time to find Navi, then getting his ocarina and horseback, then to be transformed back into his normal body, only to then save a world he just entered from being destroyed. And while people in Ocarina stated that he had the power to defeat Ganondorf, here? Nope, none of that. Everyone is wrapped up in their own problems and even celebrate the people who you go around as in the three main masks, while you are just unknown to most of these people. And really, that's more intriguing. He's determined to save this new world without people saying that it's his destiny, nor fully getting the credit to his good deeds. So yes, Wind Waker gets the point in this one, with Majora's Mask getting the half point. So moving on to the more meat of a Zelda game, the best dungeons and boss fights. The Zelda games are well known for their dungeons and especially the boss fights that happens after venturing through such dungeons, and these three games are no exceptions. Out of these three, Ocarina of Time has the most, clocking in at 9 dungeons while Majora's Mask has the least with 4, but I'm counting the moon since it contains the final boss, so 5. Wind Waker clocks in at 7, and I'm only counting the areas you go along and encounter a boss at the end, even the final ones. Each dungeon usually contains a certain theme, i.e. forest, fire, darkness, water. Let's start with Majora's Mask. Each one of the first 4 main dungeons, which being Woodfall Temple, Snowbound Temple, Great Bay Temple, and Stone Tower Temple, all implement each how the 3 main masks work, especially the first 3, and the final one, being the moon itself, tests all of the masks. They're all overall okay, but to me they can be pretty hard to navigate at times, especially Great Bay Temple. And with each one, they end with a boss that varies each time. Some are pretty standard, like the bosses in Woodfall and Stone Tower Temple. Gotta say, it would be interesting if you can climb on the bosses in the Stone Tower Temple and take them down Shadow of the Colossus style. But the Snowbound Temple's boss is a very interesting one. Great Bay Temple's boss is just a pain in the ass fish. They each hold the 4 giants that can stop the moon, and the final boss is the mask itself, in 3 forms. The mask with tentacles, just called Majora's Mask, it being a more humanoid but moving wildly called Majora's Incarnation, and a final form of it being a human monster called Majora's Wrath. It's said that the final boss represents chaos, first being small and dangerous, then unpredictable, and then destructive. It's really interesting. Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time are similar, so I'll try to lump them together to save time. Wind Waker has 7 dungeons: Dragon Roost Cavern, Forbidden Forest, Temple of the Gods, Forsaken Fortress, Earth Temple, Wind Temple, and Ganon's Tower. Ocarina of Time has 9, inside the Deku Tree, Dodongo's Cavern, inside Jubu Jubu's Belly, Forest Temple, Fire Temple, Water Temple, Shadow Temple, Spirit Temple, and Ganon's Castle. Each one uses the usual format of navigating the dungeon, getting a new item to go through the rest of the dungeon to reach the boss. Some of the dungeons are unique, 3 of them being Jubu Jubu's Belly and the Earth and Wind Temples, pretty much being escort missions, but they're not a big pain in the ass. And the Spirit Temple being the only one in Ocarina of Time where you have to go through it as both young and adult Link. The final dungeons, Ganon's Tower and Ganon's Castle, are pretty much the same as the moon, having you go through a room that represents a dungeon, then, in the case of Ganon's Tower, fight the boss once more before going off towards the final boss, in these cases Ganondorf and then Ganon for Ocarina of Time, and Puppet Ganon then Ganondorf for Wind Waker. The fights in Wind Waker seem like the final test with Puppet Ganon before the final climactic fight with Ganondorf with Zelda helping out, one of the only times a Zelda is in the fight, and it all ends with one hell of an ending. Ocarina of Time ended more climactic overall. The rush to the top of the tower, the fight with Ganondorf, the rush to exit the crumbling castle, and then the final boss, with the first reveal of his other form, Ganon. I just love this part. The shadows hitting Ganon's form, the lightning in the background. The game really feels like it was building up to this. And while Wind Waker did too, it just doesn't feel the same, and Majora's Mask doesn't as well. Since it feels like it was going to be a fight with Skull Kid, but no, the mask itself. It's not bad, but a bit misleading since I do want to knock around the Skull Kid. Each dungeon has their ups and downs. Some have more ups and some have more downs that this section could probably be its own video, but for the sake of moving on, Ocarina of Time gets the win. Most of the dungeons are generally alright, and while the water temple is annoying, it at least has an interesting mini-boss with Dark Link. But it mostly gets the win with the final run with Ganondorf and Ganon. Wind Waker just barely gets second place just because of its final climactic showdown as well. And the final score is Ocarina of Time with 2.5 points, Majora's Mask with 4.5 points, and Wind Waker with 5 points. Pretty close. Does this mean that Ocarina of Time is a bad game? Hell no. It's more of the template for most Zelda games after this one to make more interesting concepts with it. Majora's Mask has an interesting twist for what a talented studio can do with one game in only 1 year to do it. Yet I fear for some of their mental health during making this game. Wind Waker was, of course, back to form in one of the concepts creating off Ocarina of Time's template. Each one can be pretty fun on their own, but at least for me, Wind Waker stands out of the three. And that was my Ocarina of Time versus Majora's Mask versus Wind Waker video. I really hope you enjoyed this, and, well, if you agree, fantastic. If you don't, you don't. But since this is the 30th anniversary of this series, how about making your own video on this? I encourage anyone to give their opinion on this topic. Hell, even commenting on this video with your points would be interesting to me to watch. All I ask is that you use the same topics with 2 additional ones I didn't use if you choose to. Being Best Soundtrack and Best Zelda. I didn't use Best Soundtrack since I'm not the best on the subject. They're all good in their own right, none really sticking out from the others. And Best Zelda? Well, Majora's Mask only has her in a flashback, and it would only be used if Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker were tied. And being honest here, Best Link would have been optional as well, but Wind Waker and Majora's Mask were tied up while editing, so I added it here in the last minute. Otherwise I wouldn't have, since it would have been too obvious. I honestly am curious about other opinions on this. Maybe I'll make a video on the many responses, whether video or comment, or just have one with links all down the description. 30 years strong, and hopefully there are plenty more in the future. Thanks for watching, and take care, guys.